Hi guys, welcome to the video. So another requested topic today. So the topic I'm going to talk about today is emotional eating. So as humans, we eat for two main reasons. There's a physiological hunger, that's where you feel hungry, and then there's emotional reasons. So these emotional reasons could be various things. It could be stress, it could be comfort, it could be social belonging, it could be enjoyment. And often the problem with emotional eating is that people put on weight because it's not related to the normal hunger signals and satiety feelings of the body. So you often overeat and don't feel that you can stop eating. So a good way to explain it really is any time or anything that you feel like you want to eat that isn't actual real physical hunger. So it's kind of a momentary release from a feeling that you have that you're using the food to solve, to hide, basically. So if you feel bored, for example, you eat and it takes away that boredom. So that's emotional eating. That's a type of emotional eating. And the main problem with emotional eating is it only lasts as long as the food lasts. So say that you're eating a bar of chocolate, maybe it takes a few minutes to eat. That relief only happens while you're eating the bar of chocolate. And this is why it leads to binging and overeating, because then you want more to feel the release again. And it's just a continual cycle because you're trying to get away from that feeling by using food. So just to differentiate between emotional eating and physiological hunger, emotional eating often occurs randomly and suddenly, whereas physiological hunger often appears at certain times of the day and gradually, so it leads up to those certain times of the day, which are usually breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Emotional eating often is for sweet foods, so you won't crave vegetables, it will be sweet, sort of junky foods. So often when you've eaten emotionally, you won't feel full, you want more. And often you also feel a feeling of guilt because of that overeating and not actually feeling of hunger and eating for the wrong reasons. Also emotional eating, rather than a feeling in your stomach, it'll be a feeling in your mouth for food, which is a really good way to differentiate. You won't feel that sort of hunger, you'll feel a craving in your mouth. And marketing companies have really tuned into this emotional eating. They want to sell you as much food as possible, so they are really clever with it. So if you think about certain products, say like Coca-Cola, if you imagine Coca-Cola, you have the Christmas advert, which evokes the feelings of Christmas and togetherness and enjoyment and happiness. So you kind of get those feelings with that product. So you associate Coca-Cola with all those feelings. So if you want those feelings, you basically drink Coca-Cola. It's really clever marketing. You'll also notice that most junky foods, they'll have bright, colourful packets, often with a person or an animal on it, and it's like an association of a feeling and bright colours, and it's just a way to advertise to you and grab your attention. Whereas a vegetable, let's say just tomato, plain packaging, you'll buy it because you want to have nutrition in your life, basically. It's part of your meal to stop feeling hungry. It's not an emotional eating food. So one of the biggest problems with emotional eating is that it's often an unconscious habit. So your brain is often triggered by something and you're not always aware that you're doing it. So let me just explain that more. I'll use the example of shoelaces, which I love. So if you remember back to when you were learning to tie your shoelaces, it was a conscious thing. It was quite difficult. You had to learn which way to tie the lace and move it around into the intricate bow. And after a while, it became easier and easier because it built into an unconscious ability into your mind. So you don't need to think about it anymore. But what that means is, because it's unconscious, you don't really know you're doing it or how to do it. So if you try and explain to someone how to tie a shoelace, it's really difficult. You wouldn't know how to do it. So that's what an unconscious habit is. You don't really know you're doing it. I like to compare it to an app on your phone as well. You press the app and it launches the program. There's all the programming behind it. You don't really know what that is, but it just does. You triggered it, it does what it's going to do without you having to know what's going on in the background. It's all contained within the app. All you have to do is press the button and it activates. It's a bit like a habit. It's activated by a trigger, either from you or your environment around you. So these habits can be built in various ways. So they're usually linked to a place, a time, or an event. And repeating the same thing over again builds it into this habit. So I'll just give you a quick example. Maybe after lunch, you started having something sweet, and now after lunch, you crave something sweet. So you've associated your lunch with something sweet, and you always crave that now after you've had your lunch. Maybe you crave things when you sit in front of the TV at night. So you've associated the night time sitting on your sofa in front of the TV with maybe chocolate. So those things go together. When you do one, the other one is associated. One is a trigger for the other. The sofa, the time, the TV is a trigger for chocolate. And so you'll notice that if one of the triggers is different, then you won't have that habit. So if you sit in front of the TV, say in the morning, then you won't have that association with chocolate, so you won't have that craving, you won't have that emotional eating trigger. And these habits could have formed a really long time ago as well. So it's really common to have things from your childhood or early adult life as emotional eating habits. And they can be quite serious things as well. So often people could go through abuse and use food as comfort food and have associated the abuse and the food as something that's relieved them from that. So every time they feel a negative feeling, they then use food as an association to relieve that feeling. Another one, when you were younger, if you were often deprived of food and then had access to food, you often associated the access to food as abundance, so you associated having food as eating a lot. So you might have that now. When you have the ability to buy more food because you have more money, you just end up eating a lot more than you should, because in the past you learnt the fact that when there was food you would eat it because otherwise you would be hungry. So as you can see, this is quite a big topic and there are a lot of reasons why you might emotionally eat. I mentioned before the difference between physical hunger and emotional hunger, so you can identify the difference, you know if you're doing one or the other. Now I'd like to talk about a few coping strategies if you do emotionally eat. So the first one is an emotional food diary. So every time you eat, you write down what the food was, how hungry you were on a scale of 1 to 10, what you felt like before you ate, and what you felt like after you ate. And you'll do this every day, and you'll start to be able to identify whether you are emotionally eating and what you feel like if you're hungry, if you're actually hungry, if you feel okay before, and what does it make you feel like after in terms of emotional feelings. So the second one is just to understand how emotions work. So when you do have quite a strong negative emotion, it might be sadness or boredom, just understand that emotions come and go, they ebb and flow. So it's like an up and down thing. So when you realize that, you can kind of learn strategies or just the ability to see them out. So if you are sad, if you are bored, don't feed it with food, because you start to create that association. As soon as you start creating that association, doing it over and over again, you start to link that emotion with that thing. So sadness with chocolate, boredom with cake, things like that. And you create the bad habits. You kind of teach your body to want food when you're not actually hungry. So the idea here is to tolerate it until you're actually hungry, so you're eating for physiological hunger and not emotional reasons. So number 3 is to realize that there are other ways to experience pleasure in life. So rather than using food to give yourself pleasure and associate it with that bad feeling, do something else that gives you pleasure that's more positive and doesn't lead to weight gain. So if you are feeling sad, maybe go out with friends, see your friends, go for a walk or a run. Exercise is great for endorphins and making you feel good. So you've associated that bad feeling, sadness, and then giving yourself pleasure in a different way, which isn't detrimental. The food is detrimental because it's causing you to gain weight, whereas running, exercise, social activities, they're positive things. So number 4 is when you do eat, savor the food, taste the taste, take it in, close your eyes. It sounds silly, but the more you taste and feel what you're eating, the more enjoyment and pleasure you'll get out of it, rather than just stuffing it in your face without realizing it. A lot of people will sit in front of the TV and just do the hand-to-mouth thing, and they're not actually paying attention to what they're eating. It's just emotion, and their brain is engaged into whatever they're doing, like around them, the TV or whatever, and they're not actually enjoying their food. It's kind of a wasted experience. So savor what you're eating, make the most of it. So number 5 is don't feed the negative emotions with food. So as I've mentioned before, the more you do it, the more you associate and the more it's linked and the more it becomes a coping strategy. Just like, say, alcohol or drugs. When you feel a certain thing, you've associated alcohol, drugs with the relief from that. The same thing happens with food. So don't feed the negative emotions with food. So the next one is intermittent fasting. So intermittent fasting is a great way to tune into your real hunger signals. So a lot of people have lost the feeling of hunger and they often eat for emotional reasons before they actually start feeling hungry. So not eating for certain periods of the day, or say 24 hours if it's a 24-hour fast, you start to feel hunger. You start to deal with it, realize it's not a bad thing and you don't have to eat straight away when you feel it. And you start to tolerate it and build up that resistance to it. So you don't have to run to food as soon as you start feeling hungry. So it's a great coping strategy to start to, like I said, build the sense into, or start feeling hunger again and realizing that you can tolerate it and what it actually is, and it helps you enjoy your food a lot more. So after a 24-hour fast, people would say that their first meal is so enjoyable just because they've learned to feel the hunger and they value it, and just breaking from the cycle, it makes the food taste so much better. So it's a great way to, like I said, tune into valuing food and eating for real reasons. So the final one I'd like to talk about today is wording, and this is so important. So let me just explain that. Don't think of a black cat. What you do, you think of a black cat straight away because the brain can't not do something. So this is really important with the words we use, because if you say, I don't want to be fat anymore, your brain thinks about being fat. It's all associated with being fat. So instead of using what we call away from language, so I don't want to be over there anymore, we use what we call towards language. I want to go that way, I want to be there. So instead of saying I don't want to be fat anymore, you'd say I want to be fit, I want to be healthy, because your brain concentrates on those words. I want to be slim. Your brain concentrates on those words. You don't want to be concentrating on the words fat, weight, things like that. You want to be concentrating on the positive towards language, stuff that you're aiming towards, not going away from. So this one you can start to notice in your everyday life. Do you use those negative away from words, those things in the past, those things you don't want, or those positive towards words, those things you want, the direction you're going, your future, the things that are pulling you towards them? It's a real sort of interesting thing to think about and notice if you're doing or not, because everyone does it. It's just a strategy that you have to learn. Think more about the positive words and where you want to go rather than the negative words and where you don't want to be. So I hope you enjoyed this introduction to emotional eating. From here, just know your triggers. Know why you might be emotional eating. Is it because you are bored? Is it because you don't have enough pleasure in your life? Is it because you're lonely? It could be any number of reasons. And just remember, don't fall into the vicious cycle of binge eating to satisfy negative emotions, because when you do eat emotionally, you feel bad, then you want to eat more, then you feel bad because of that, and it becomes a vicious cycle. And that's basically what emotional eating is. So I hope you got a lot out of this video, guys. Remember, there's the diary for emotional eating you can fill in every day to see if you are emotionally eating. As always, like, share and comment, and I will see you in the next one.